afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum, Oregon's premier public affairs forum. I'm Sharon Van Sickle Robbins, president of the City Club, and I would like to welcome you all, those of you here with us today at the Governor Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB or KBPS radio or watching on Portland Community Media's CityNet 30. Thank you for joining City Club today on February 4th for this week's Friday Forum. In consideration of those sitting close to you and those in our radio and television audiences, will everyone in the room please silence your cell phones? Today we will hear from Kim Smith about what's happening at the Oregon Zoo, but first a few announcements. I'd like to thank our media partners, including Oregon Business Magazine, and I'd also like to offer our appreciation to the Friday Forum corporate sponsors whose generous financial support makes these luncheons possible. We are extremely pleased to have as our winter quarter sponsors Stoll Reeves, The Standard, and West Coast Bank. Please join me in offering them our sincere appreciation. If your company or firm would like to be a City Club sponsor, please contact City Club staff at the back of the room or call the City Club office. This spring, City Club will offer a coordinated series of thought-provoking programs that will challenge conventional political wisdom and explore genuinely innovative and long-term solutions to Oregon's fiscal crisis. Kicking off with a talk by Governor John Kitzhaber on March 4th, City Club's Friday Forums and other events will investigate new ways to stimulate economic development, improve government services, and ensure adequate revenue. Keep your eyes open for more about our spring series entitled From Crisis to Opportunity, Exploring Solutions to Oregon's Fiscal Challenges. And now to today's program. Housing more than 100 unique animals from around the globe, the Oregon Zoo must attempt to balance the needs of its animals, its commitment to species conservation, and its status as Oregon's premier and most popular paid tourist attraction. Today, Kimberly Smith, director of the Oregon Zoo, will present her vision for the zoo's future. She will discuss the implementation of the $125 million zoo bond measure passed in 2008 and will outline groundbreaking ideas for animal management and exhibit design that are in the works. Kim has 27 years of comprehensive zoo experience. Before joining the Oregon Zoo in March 2010, she served as Vice President of Animal Care at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago. There, she directed the design and construction of the zoo's $27 million Great Bear Wilderness and a $4 million Dolphinarium renovation. She also designed and managed the expansion of Brookfield's outdoor elephant habitat. A noted conservationist, Kim's highest profile efforts on behalf of wildlife came when she was curator of birds at the Milwaukee County Zoo, where she played a role in the successful release of trumpeter swans to the wild and recovery efforts for piping plovers and whooping cranes. She's still involved in conservation-related work and currently serves on the ethics board of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And now, please help me welcome Oregon Zoo Director Kim Smith.
Hope I won't spill this glass of water everywhere, huh? Good afternoon. How is everyone today? Good. You know, it's an honor for me to stand before the City Club this afternoon. Oregon Zoo has had a great and storied history in this city, and the City Club has always been a really big part of it. In 1951, the City Club helped our great zoo move in from its old location to our current site. Without your support, we would not have the beautiful zoo that we enjoy today. So give yourselves a round of applause, City Club. Come on. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the experiences that have brought me here today, not only to the City Club, but to the Oregon Zoo. I must say that Portland is a beautiful city, and you all know that after living here. My family and I have really appreciated the hospitality of everyone that we have met. After living almost 15 years in the Midwest, though, I have noticed a few differences between here and there, especially from Chicago. Here, my neighbors all know me by my dog's name. They all, when they see me, say, "Hi, Clancy's mom." I'm not sure they know my name, really. In the Midwest, nobody really noticed that I owned a dog. I've also noticed that you all say things a little differently around here. It took me a month to learn how to say Willamette correctly. I used to practice for hours in my car. My dad grew up in the Pacific Northwest and used to say things like "warsh" for wash. He, of course, said Oregon correctly, but it took me years to stop saying warsh. I've also noticed a difference in the type of dress between Chicago and Portland. In Chicago, the uniform was a black turtleneck sweater, black pants, and black high-heeled boots. I never could get used to the black high-heeled boots. I'm basically an old zookeeper in a suit, and I just couldn't understand why couldn't I still wear tennis shoes or hiking boots or something. In Portland, the uniform appears to be anything that goes with jeans, a fleece vest, and hiking boots. Everyone's going, yes. I knew when I saw that I had arrived home. A lot of people say their offices are like working in a zoo, but I actually get to truly do that. Seriously, it's all just primate behavior in the end, but I get to actually visit with monkeys and apes, and you all are just stuck with each other. With that in mind, many people have asked me, why would you do this for a living? That question always makes me reflect on a moment in my life that I decided to work with wildlife. So let me take you back to the life of a 12-year-old. At 12, I was a pretty shy kid, really into science and school. I also lived in a rural town in Arizona. Each day, I would walk a mile on a dusty road to the bus stop. It was on this sun-baked trek one afternoon that I was reflecting on an article I had read at school that day. As I trudged down the road with my book bag and violin, I couldn't stop thinking about the subjects of that article, and they were red wolves and whooping cranes. These animals were destined for extinction, and according to the author, may never be seen again. At 12, I had already started showing a bent for saving the world. A big task if you're 12, no doubt. The loss of the whooping crane just seemed inconceivable to me at 12. This large white bird used to fly in flocks that would block out the sun. They were as tall as me at 12. I couldn't forget that bird and decided that somehow, someday, I would work to help save wildlife and animals like the whooping crane. Of course, as the years passed, I eventually ended up on a path that brought me to working with wildlife. 20 years later, I was sitting in my office at the Milwaukee County Zoo. I had spent the last 15 years working in various zoo jobs, doing everything from working with elephants to rearing endangered birds. I had driven across the country and through a blizzard to get to my job as a curator of birds at Milwaukee County Zoo. I loved everything about this job. I loved working with all the different birds. I loved bringing endangered birds back from the brink of extinction, birds like the trumpeter swan and whooping cranes. And I loved walking each morning through my beautiful aviary before the visitors arrived. It was time for just me and the birds. We had been working on several endangered species recovery programs and were looking for another bird to help. One fall afternoon, the phone rang. I thought, maybe I'll let that go to voicemail. It's a bit late. The phone kept ringing, and I thought, fine, I'll answer it. Probably just someone who wanted me to take their ill-behaved parrot anyway. But it was the International Crane Foundation, and they were wondering if I could help them with a problem. And I said, sure, we've worked together before, why not? The next statement was something I couldn't believe I was hearing. The voice on the other end of the line was asking if we would be willing to help with whooping cranes. I had been dreaming of doing just that since I was 12. You have no idea, I thought. Of course, anything. Probably should have waited to see what they asked for, though. So my zoo became a place for young cranes to come when they didn't make it on their first migration and ended up injured or worse, walking through someone's suburban backyard. They are supposed to fly from Wisconsin to Florida, but as we all know, directions and maps don't always send you where they are supposed to. We've all heard stories of travelers driving to lakes after listening to their GPS systems. I know mine's tried that a couple times. Sometimes migrating birds, especially first-timers, fall victim to their own internal GPS malfunctions. While landing in a lake may not be so bad for them, landing in a suburban backyard might not work out so well. Within a few months, a young juvenile whooping crane named Torch entered my life. He had the misfortune of breaking his wing on the day he was to be released. Must have been destiny, given the level of grace I show on any given day. That is totally something that I would have done if I was a bird. I once fell into a flamingo pond while carrying a bucket of food. I'm still not sure what I tripped over. It was probably me. But before I knew it, I was dripping wet, sitting in a pond, covered from head to toe in brown soup that was supposed to be the flamingo's dinner. The flamingos were all gathered around me, squawking, turning their heads upside down to get a better look. They weren't very happy, by the way. At least all Torch had was sympathetic bird people looking at him when this happened, and not a flock of flamingos discussing how he had ruined their dinner. Torch had missed the opportunity to migrate with his group, and he must have been mortified, much like I felt in that flamingo pond on a hot summer day. We were going to get along just fine. When Torch arrived at the zoo, I was there to receive him. The anticipation was killing me as I waited for that van to arrive. I had never seen a live whooping crane before, just pictures. I could only imagine what he was going to look like in real life. The opportunity to actually hold a whooping crane while we treated his wing was just something I could not pass up. This was the animal that had started it all for me. When he came out of the van, alert and confused, I just couldn't believe how beautiful he was. His juvenile colors were smoky gray with white, and he was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. I scooped up the 4-foot-tall bird into my arms and quickly took him inside. His wing had been operated on and pinned, and he had quite the cast. Looked a lot like my next-door neighbor's daughter when she broke her arm, only I can guarantee you we weren't going to be writing well wishes on his cast. I'm not sure U.S. Fish and Wildlife would have loved that. As I walked down the hall with Torch, I had the most amazing feeling. This bird wasn't supposed to even be on this planet in 2007, and yet I had him in my arms. This is why I did what I did for a living, literally. The efforts of organizations such as the International Crane Foundation and the Milwaukee County Zoo made it possible to partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to save an endangered species and bring it back from the brink of extinction and oblivion. Our world is facing an extinction crisis of an incredible magnitude. When I was 12, I was horrified that a whooping crane may never be seen again. There's now the possibility that hundreds of species will disappear from the earth forever, from frogs to birds to even polar bears. Who would have ever thought the iconic polar bear might not be crossing the Arctic tundra looking for food much longer? The Oregon Zoo works at this level of conservation with animals such as the California condor. Now that is a bird that can truly block the sun. They have a wingspan of 9.5 feet. It's a pretty big bird if you ask me. The Oregon Zoo collaborates with 3 other zoos and U.S. Fish and Wildlife to bring the condor back from extinction, and it's working. I can remember the day the California condor came out of the wild. and it seemed completely hopeless. There was no way this bird would ever fly over the skies of California ever again. That was 24 years ago. We now have birds flying over the skies of California, Arizona, and parts of Utah. Someday, they may even fly once again over the skies of Oregon, maybe even the zoo. Lewis and Clark actually saw a California condor in the Columbia River Gorge, and they are an iconic animal for the tribes that have inhabited this land for generations. When I visit our condor breeding facility and see the incredible work of our staff, it makes me proud to be at this zoo. When our condor keeper tells me about her latest idea to teach the birds to be released and how to find food and stay away from people, it really shows her passion for bringing this endangered animal back from extinction. California condors, like Torch the whooping crane, weren't supposed to be here, but they are through our work. So you're probably thinking, so what if a condor never flies over Oregon? Who cares? He blocks the sun, for crying out loud. Well, they are a huge part of our environment, and they're the cleanup crew. They are the garbage folks, but with a badder attitude. And they don't leave the garbage can outside in your driveway. They clean up everything, every last scrap. The cycle of life needs every component to make the whole thing work. Kind of like a recipe for a cake. You need all of the ingredients, not just some, to get the cake to come out right. Imagine feeling the shadow of a California condor passing over your head, blocking the sun for just a moment as you hike the gorge. I know what that shadow feels like. I was once hiking in the Andes Mountains in South America and had 3 Andean condors fly overhead. They were hundreds of feet above me, riding a warm burst of air. Yet they blocked the sun very briefly, and their shadows chased me across the ground. I remember thinking, that is really cool. Well, as you can imagine, I have had many moments in my career where I thought, that was pretty cool. Nobody gets to see that. One of those days was the first day I met an elephant. I was 17 years old and a high school volunteer at the Phoenix Zoo. I had been volunteering for about 6 months, and I was that goofy kid that just couldn't get enough. I was still shy, totally into science. The elephant keepers had taken a shine to me, though, and asked their boss if I could volunteer with them for the summer. And the answer was yes. So that hot summer day in June, I jumped on the rumbling gas-powered cart that smelled like elephants and rode to the elephant barn with the keepers. The lead keeper's name was Tawny, and she was tough, but loved those elephants like no other. We walked into the barn and went over the rules. Stay with Tawny, don't make any sudden moves, and do as you're told, no matter what. She looked at me and said, do you understand? I mean, she's talking to a 17-year-old, right? At that moment, I was thinking, I am sitting on a box of carrots, getting ready to go in with 3 elephants. And there is nothing about this that I don't understand. This is pretty cool. So we both get up and slip between the large posts to separate us from the elephants. And 3 incredibly large gray animals approached us. Tawny gives them all a command to stop and wait. And they do. We then approach Ruby, the largest, an Asian elephant. Tawny instructs me to approach her side and pat her head. As I walked up, very carefully, I listened to Tawny. I am struck by the fact the tip of her ear barely hits the top of my head. and I am not exactly short. I looked up into her soft brown eye and see not just an amazingly large animal, but an intelligent one who is sizing up who I am. To stand there was one of those experiences you just don't ever forget. When you see an elephant from a distance, you think, wow, they're kind of big. To stand next to one is like standing next to one of those large mining trucks I grew up with in Arizona. If you know what I'm talking about, they dwarf a man just with their tire. They're huge. You realize that this is an animal with a lot of power and strength, and you don't really compare. I mean, it's 4,000 pounds versus 155 pounds. Do the math. After spending several days working around the elephants, I got to know the 2 African elephants as well. They were young and goofy. One of them, Mbala, was fond of following you around, offering you a variety of behaviors, anything, hoping maybe one of them was something you'd give her a treat for. That isn't really how training works, but you really had to give her points for effort. I worked in and around the elephants all summer and later for 8 years as a zookeeper. I watched Ruby learn to paint, and the 2 young African elephants learned how to operate in their small herd. I knew that elephants would always be a part of my life, and their welfare would always be a top priority for me. Ruby, along with other elephants I have known, have inspired me to want a better future for them. I once knew an African elephant named Affy at the Brookfield Zoo that cemented this commitment to elephants. Affy was an old elephant with an incredible personality. I knew her in life and death. She was one of those incredible animals that was just really fun to know. Her favorite treat was a watermelon, and she was fond of eating it whole. And I do mean whole. To see an elephant put an entire watermelon in their mouth and eat it like it's a piece of candy is something to see. She didn't even get chipmunk cheeks when she did it. These animals have incredible intelligence, are fun-loving, and inquisitive. And I know that Affy, Ruby, and Mbala would all love the habitats we are designing for our elephants at the Oregon Zoo. Portland has always loved its elephants, and Packy, of course, is legend around here. What many of you may not know is that our elephant program is internationally known and recognized. We have the most dedicated and amazing staff I have ever seen. It is with a privilege that our zoo has been given the opportunity to design a new elephant exhibit and a remote elephant center that will be located off zoo property. The vision of our staff is to create herds that will allow for the natural social behaviors of elephants. We also plan to allow our bulls to socialize with these herds as they would in the wild. This is work we are currently pioneering. The new exhibit will provide a dynamic and enriching landscape with lots of interesting things to do. We have a wonderful climate and intend to give our animals the ability to choose if they wish to be in or out. It shouldn't be our choice. They are intelligent, and if they want to go for a walk on a winter day, go for it. The warm indoor space is open for them to come back into as they choose. Some of the design concepts that we are working on are very different and are a theme for the rest of our exhibits. We intend to increase choice and comfort for our animals that pioneers how they've been cared for. As we walk through this incredible journey of designing new animal habitats for our primates, polar bears, and condors, our staff has been tasked with being innovative in every aspect of design. As a former zookeeper, this is the chance of a lifetime to really make a difference for animal welfare. I've spent my career working to make sure the animals under my care receive the best care I could possibly offer them. Now, thanks to the incredible confidence of our voters in 2008, the Oregon Zoo has a chance to truly change how our animals live, how our kids learn about them, and how we honor their intelligence. When I was a zookeeper, I had the privilege of knowing a male gorilla named Congo. He was a magnificent animal and lived with a grouchy old female named Hazel. She was a really big grouch, let me tell you. They lived in a concrete exhibit with a water moat. It had platforms the animals could climb on, and we used to give them palm fronds to play with. Congo was a gentle soul, and he would often come into the night house when I was working just to see if I might maybe give him a treat, which I usually did. I must admit, he captured a big piece of my heart. I hated hearing people jeer at him, throw stuff at him to get him to move. The concrete was not something that looked like a place Congo would have lived in the wild. I really wanted people to appreciate him for who he was, both as an endangered species and the wonderful animal I knew personally. Congo eventually moved on to live in the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, where he lived out his life. I will never, however, forget him, and he inspires me every day to push for the innovative exhibit that will truly give our animals a great life and honor them as individuals that deserve our respect and reverence. Our new primate exhibits will provide a variety of places for the animals to interact with the public, each other, and when they feel like it, to go on a long walk in their ever-changing habitat. Our goal is to mimic what their environment would look like in the wild. They live in large social groups. They encounter other social groups. And they explore different spaces every day. The question we ask the most at the Oregon Zoo is why? Why do we have to do things the way we've always done them? Do the primates have to come inside at night? Or can they choose where they sleep? We think they get to choose. Do we have to use concrete? How about less is more? Creating concrete is actually an activity that has a huge carbon footprint. It is not permeable to water, and it radiates heat. There is no reason to use it on floors of our animal areas anymore. Concrete was used because it was easy to disinfect. That was needed when we didn't have the advances in veterinary medicine that we have today. As a zookeeper, we had to often scrub floors with a disinfectant to get rid of bacteria and anything else that could harm our animals. But concrete is an old idea. Zoos have come a long way in the 27 years I've been working in them. The medical advances alone have been nothing short of revolutionary. In the mid-'80s, when I entered the field, it looked very different than it does today. Zoo veterinarians back then were often dedicated individuals who worked in livestock veterinary practices before they arrived at the zoo. This was definitely true of the first vet I ever knew. His name was Dr. Hoot, and he was an older gentleman, wiry, thin, and given to sarcasm. He would often pull up to one of our animal areas with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and would say, "What's up?" Our options for treating wildlife were very limited, and everything was very hands-on, and I mean hands-on. Today, if we need to treat an animal, we train it to come into a chute and present the body part we want to look at. Our staff at the Oregon Zoo has actually trained polar bears to tilt their heads just the right way to receive eye drops. And we have trained tigers to present their tails for a blood draw. In my day, we had not yet discovered these techniques, and everything was done by catching an animal, usually by hand. Once, 4 of us zookeepers, accompanied by Dr. Hood, went up to look at an Arabian oryx. Oryx are a beautiful white and tan antelope about the size of a small pony. The biggest difference, though, is that they have large pointed horns on the top of their heads that are about a foot long and can spear you in an instant. Think pony with swords on their heads, and you'll get the general idea. As we stood watching the animal in question, Dr. Hood says to us, "Well, what you waiting for? Go get it." We all looked at him and our senior keeper and said, "What? Must be crazy." Gino, our senior keeper, stepped forward to give us instruction. Now, I must preface this by saying Gino was one of those people in your life that you never said no to. You're thinking in your head, I should tell him no, this is crazy. But you don't, it doesn't come out that way. Somehow he convinces you to do what it is he's asking, and you just can't think of a reason why not. So Gino tells us, it's really quite simple. We each have a job, one for the head, two for the body, and one for the hindquarters. Don't hesitate, work as a team, and don't get stabbed. Awesome. Turns out the most important part was the don't get stabbed part. As the only female in the group, the guy thought it would be very funny to give me the head, the don't get stabbed part. Needless to say, we efficiently grabbed the animal, treated him, and let him go. I remember thinking, there has got to be a better way. We were all thinking that. This event raised my blood pressure. I'm not sure the Oryx didn't feel the same way. Luckily, an evolution in animal management occurred, and we have learned how to use positive reinforcement training to teach our animals how to help us help them. You're probably asking right now, what is positive reinforcement training? It is a method of training pioneered by people like Karen Pryor, an author and trainer. And it uses positive reinforcement as a way to shape behaviors you want the animal to do voluntarily. For instance, I own a beagle, and like any pet, he needs training to be a good companion, and if you've met my beagle, you would agree. Of course, I am always looking for ways to teach him of doing things that benefit him and our life together. When we moved to Illinois, our house had a half-acre backyard, and he loved that yard. So much he refused to come in when I called. And I'm thinking, well, that's not going to work. This is not what I need when I'm trying to get out of the door in the morning with 2 kids. I decided we needed a trained behavior with a verbal cue to bring that dog in instantly from the backyard. I know you're thinking, of course, the zoo director would do that with her dog. So how did I convince my wayward beagle that this was a really good idea? I found a reward he liked above all else: food. He's a beagle. We stood in the doorway of the backyard, and I gave the command, inside. And if he crossed the threshold immediately, he got a treat. If he didn't cross the threshold, no treat. Well, he's a beagle, and he figured it out pretty fast. I like food. I spent 30 minutes on repeating this behavior with the treat going in and out on our deck. He has retained this behavior now for 3 years and comes in instantly when I call, Clancy, inside. All of his shaping of this behavior was done with positive reinforcement, and it worked. This was a fairly new concept, though, 20 years ago, but it has become common practice today. Honestly, I can't imagine doing it any other way now, and it is how we train our animals at the Oregon Zoo today. Technology has increased, and our ability and knowledge has increased as well. Today is not entirely out of the ordinary to use digital radiography or a CAT scan to treat our animals and diagnose them. We now have highly professional veterinarians that dedicate their lives to our wildlife. Of course, the Oregon Zoo takes the health and welfare of its animals very seriously, and with our bond measure, are currently building a state-of-the-art veterinary hospital for our animals. Next fall, we will open this brand new state-of-the-art veterinary hospital, and as we speak, the foundation is being poured, and pretty soon we're going to be able to walk through the surgical suites and the treatment rooms as they're being built. This project is on budget and on time. It is also a shining example of sustainable building. and is expected to be certified as LEED Silver. Water will be recycled in this project to use in animal area washdowns and people bathrooms. It is the first of our bond projects to be constructed and incredibly vital to our veterinary staff. One of the areas of focus for our master plan is water and how to conserve it. Growing up in the deserts of Arizona, I lived water conservation every day. Water was something you just didn't see very often. In fact, it only rained twice a year, August and January. That was it. If you went on a road trip to Tucson or Flagstaff, you took a gallon of water with you. It was a necessity, and people who didn't and had car trouble often died. Lack of water permeated every part of our lives. I used to think a thunderstorm was an event. I know it's hard to believe when the rain just won't stop here. It does, right? I mean, I've only been here 11 months, although it's beautiful today. When I was 28 years old, I became the curator of birds at the Milwaukee County Zoo in Wisconsin. Milwaukee is, of course, located on Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes. I had read about these incredible lakes when I was a kid and was really looking forward to seeing that much water in one place. Remember, I grew up in the desert, where a lake was something that wasn't that deep, could dry up, and you could walk around it in about an hour. So when we arrived in Wisconsin, my husband and I made a beeline to the shore of Lake Michigan. This was something we really had to see. I stood there on the sandy shore, waves crashing against the rocks and water as far as the eye could see. My husband looked at me and asked, why did I look so puzzled? And I responded that I was just surprised that I couldn't see land on the other side. He laughs and said, what do you think? You're going to see Canada? And I said, well, yeah, I kind of did. Or Michigan at least, right? Something. Well, this was not a lake. It was a mini ocean. So why am I telling you a story about a lake far away? Well, the Great Lakes are incredible, and I was amazed at how much water could be in one place. It is, however, not limitless, just like our legendary rain is not limitless. Growing up in a desert gave me an appreciation for how precious water really is, and it is our duty to conserve something so vital for life. Everyone looks at water in different ways. Recycling water and reducing energy use is a large focus of our bond projects. We are intending to conserve more than 11 million gallons of water, which will not only be the right thing to do for the environment, but provide more water for your children to drink. By recycling stormwater that drains through our property, we will help provide a cleaner Willamette River for your children to play in. Another part of being a sustainable zoo is working hard to be good stewards, not just of our natural resources, but our money as well. When I was in high school, my parents required me to earn my own money for clothes and whatever else I wanted. We lived on a farm, so I started my own business of raising over 20 calves each summer and selling them to local farmers. I know I wasn't a normal kid. I would purchase one-day-old calves from local dairies, raise them until they could eat on their own, and sell them for profit. I learned how to manage my money and carefully track my expenses. If expenses exceeded profit, I was not buying new clothes for the school year. It is this ethic I have taken with me throughout my career. While traveling in Europe this fall, I visited a private zoo in the Netherlands. The zoo director at this zoo answered my question on how he was funded by answering, "You don't have to earn what you don't spend." And I think that pretty much sums it up. As stewards of public money, it is important to me that the Oregon Zoo runs an efficient business. In the past 11 months, we have kept several large projects on schedule and within budget, such as the Red Ape Reserve exhibit and our brand new veterinary medical center. As a high school student, I learned even more that just how to be a good steward of money. I was also lucky enough to participate in a youth leadership program. I was in FFA, which at the time stood for Future Farmers of America. My experiences there changed my life. They taught me that anything was possible if you worked hard enough. I ran for office, became the secretary. My position was by the ear of corn. Those in FFA know what I'm talking about, and seriously, it was really important to be by the ear of corn. Accomplishments were valued, but you had to prove yourself. I was good with animals and became a member of the livestock judging team. We traveled the state, testing our skills on our ability to correctly identify a quality cow or pig. My team won the state championship and went on to the national competition. I had never been on a plane until that day we left for Kansas City, Missouri. FFA taught me that I could leave a small farm town in Arizona and do more. They gave me the ability to go to college through a full scholarship and confidence to embark on a zoo career. It's leadership programs like FFA that make a difference in our youth and give them a goal. Over 300 teens participate in Oregon Zoo programs each year, and we are working to strengthen that program to hopefully create tomorrow's leaders. We have kids that learn how to handle animals and talk to younger kids about them. Teens actually run our farm area and the insect zoo. These kids put in thousands of hours and learn everything from what it takes to care for an elephant to how you train a goat to take a bow. Train a goat to bow may sound easy, but I dare any of you to train your dog to do the same. What these kids accomplish is nothing short of phenomenal. Our vision is to continue to work with our teens and expand our programs regionally. My big dream is to create an environmental stewardship youth leadership program that provides an experience similar to what FFA gave me, a place to learn, grow, and believe that anything is possible. Recently, I met one of our zoo teens who was also in FFA, and she was shocked to hear that we shared that in common. Like me, she was working at the zoo and had a dream of saving wildlife. As I watched her enter college this year and embark on her future, I think about the world she is inheriting and what she will accomplish. Who knows? Maybe one of these days she'll even become a zoo director. I want to thank you all for allowing me to shed some light on my experiences and how they have led me to this great opportunity of being the director of your Oregon Zoo. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you this afternoon. Thank you.
The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from our Friday Forum host. And our host today is City Club Governor Ted Kay. Ted has been a City Club member since 1990, and he received the City Club President's Award in 2008 and 2009. Ted?
Thank you. Kim, as I listened to your remarks, I thought how appropriate it is that there are a dozen elephants and other animals on the walls here looking down on us today. My question, the Oregon Zoo has many neighbors in Washington Park. The World Forestry Center, the Children's Museum, Hoyt Arboretum, the memorials, the Japanese Garden, and a Max station. To what extent do you, the zoo, work with these other institutions, and what issues are you currently dealing with?
Thank you, Ted. Well, we do live in Washington Park, which is historic and gorgeous and beautiful park, and our neighbors, the Children's Museum, the World Forestry Center, we also have the Hoyt Arboretum and the Japanese Gardens are all incredible partners with us up there on the hill. And we work very collectively together to further our own goals up there. We also work with Portland Parks and Recreation as well. And so we actually have the Washington Park Alliance, which is a group that we all form to get together. We meet about once a month and plan common goals. We all do work closely with TriMet, so it's definitely a large partnership.
Any issues right now?
We're just working together on everything. We're always looking at parking, of course, and always working collectively to solve that parking lot and get everybody on TriMet more often.
We will now take questions from the floor. Asking questions at Friday Forums is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. If I flash my famous question mark card, it means that we're still waiting for the question.
Elaine Cogan, City Club member. Thank you very much for your very inspirational address to us today. But as good as zoos are or will be in the future, how do you answer those critics who say that as good as they are, we shouldn't put any of these animals in a zoo?
It is a question that gets asked a lot, and I will tell you that if you have been to Africa or any of these other places where wild animals are, there is very little wild left. In fact, over the next 20 years, many of our animals are facing a huge extinction crisis. Zoos play a huge role in that, in showing a kid what an elephant really looks like, making sure they're passionate about saving those animals for the future. If you think about it, elephants right now really don't have any wild left. In fact, most of them are being kept in preserves, which is very much a captive environment. So we really have to understand that we've got to get our kids learning more about wildlife and more about the world we live in and being good stewards. And so in my mind, zoos will always exist for that purpose, to make sure that we educate our children of the future that we need to save this world.
Hi, Don Williams, City Club member. The zoo works under the Metro umbrella, and as it did with the Metro predecessor, Metropolitan Service District, when one looks at the other functions of Metro, solid waste and land use planning, one could argue that the zoo is kind of out of sync with that and doesn't really belong there. So make a case why this makes sense organizationally, or if you were to start over, what would be the best funding mechanism and the place for the zoo to be?
You know, the zoo is a community resource, and we are incredibly lucky to be part of Metro. When I came here, I've worked in a variety of zoos in my career, both public and private, and I must tell you that our commitment by our community through Metro is amazing, and you would never want to give that up. I actually feel a tremendous amount of synergy with Metro, with the zoo, with Metro sustainability projects and its focus on the environment. That is a huge point of contact between us and Metro. We also serve 1.7 million people, not only in our Tri-County area, but through the state. It's a great platform to talk about things like climate change, and transportation is something we can talk about, and we will be talking about. If you get out of your car, you will save a polar bear. It's interconnected. So the funding model, frankly, is very positive for us. Having worked in private zoos and struggling the way we did, to have the level of support that we have by Metro in our community is unparalleled. So I think the case is really strong for us to be part of Metro.
Kim, I'm Roger Meyer, City Club member and a longtime fan of the Brookfield and Milwaukee. I've taken my kids to all those zoos that you've worked at, and I wanted to know if you could enlarge a little bit about your educational mission and your relationship with the zoo and the school systems, because it seems to me that's a natural partnership too. And I was so thrilled, as I said to you a little while ago, about your ZAP and your zoo teens. And would you enlarge a little bit on your educational mission? Because I think that's the most important contribution the zoo makes to our society.
Yeah, our educational mission, we do work very closely with the schools and making sure that we not only provide them with topics they can talk about with their classrooms, we actually go into the classrooms and engage with the teachers and the kids. They come to us. We serve about 700,000 kids a year in this state, not just in the Portland area. So we really reach a lot of kids. We're really hoping to expand that even more and really get out even farther with that. Our ZAP and UNO programs reach into communities that may not have access to us in other ways. These are kids that often come from alternative schools, but the kids coming out of that program have a 92% graduation rate after they come through ZAP and UNO. And so I think our impact educationally on our teens and our children is huge.
Hi, Dennis Cusack, City Club member. We have other institutions like the Oregon Coast Aquarium that have complementary missions but are also very important to the state. I'm curious what kind of cooperation is there between the zoo and the aquarium or other similar institutions? Do we have a 1 + 1 = 3 or something like that that's happening?
Actually, zoos nationwide work very cooperatively. We're part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums organization, which is our trade organization, and accredits us. We are accredited by very high standards and inspected by our peers every 5 years. And let me tell you, they're like your worst critic, you know. So we work very closely to manage our animals, to do our educational programs. Every aspect of our business, we work collaboratively with over 270 institutions in the nation and even in the world. We're also a member of the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, so we also work with zoos across the world. We get a tremendous benefit from that. There is sometimes reciprocal arrangements that can be made, but that's zoo by zoo. It just depends on the individual zoo's business model, so that's dependent on individual setups that we have. But I would say cooperatively over time that we have very close relationships, especially with our Oregon institutions, but also across the nation.
Melody Rose, City Club member. I'm just curious if you could elaborate a bit for us on the remote elephant exhibit that's in planning stages. I know I've been taking my children to the zoo for 15 years, and I'm just wondering, from a visitor standpoint, what will that experience look like, and how does it differ from what we experience today?
Well, we are building an on-site exhibit as well, that in the bond measure asked for a 6-acre exhibit. So our vision for elephants is to create 2 herds between the remote elephant center and the exhibit and make sure these are very dynamic environments, and again, that we are able to really replicate their natural social behaviors. So our vision really is if a female elephant has a female calf and so on, they're never separated, which is what they do in the wild. And then our bulls, which in the wild would travel between herds and socialize, will get that opportunity going between the two, and that we would have a very strong breeding program, which is really needed, and it is for the social welfare of our animals. So that is our vision going to the Remote Elephant Center. We are in feasibility and concept right now with that, and we're just working on all of that right now, developing budgets, looking for properties, things like that.
Sharon Padgett, City Club member. On the elephant exhibit that you just expanded on, but my question is, when you have the parcel off of the main zoo campus, will visitors be able to go? Is it someplace that people will be able to visit and see what you're doing there?
One of our ethics at the Oregon Zoo is to be incredibly transparent. So we don't want that property to become this kind of secret elephant location, you know. They all have to have a secret code to get in. We want our public to know what's going on out there. We want to be able to visit. We're talking about doing like open houses so people can come and see what's going on. Talk about having cameras that show what's going on at the property at our exhibit. All of that is in concept, but we totally intend to have it so that you can come see it.
Leslie Johnson, City Club member. I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 questions. 1, do you have a favorite animal yet at our zoo? And 2, after the veterinary facilities and the elephant remote setting and the social experience that you're describing, have you started a wish list for the next project or projects?
Okay, so my favorite animal, huh? That was the first question. So if I'm really a good zoo director, I'll say I love them all. I do have favorites, but I have to say I've never met truly an animal I didn't like and love. They're all really fascinating to me. I have thought the black widows were fascinating all the way up to an elephant is fascinating. There are animals that have struck my heart over the years. I talked about some of them in my speech. There was a Spangled Cotinga, which is a beautiful little South American bird that I bred for the first time in the world when I was a curator at Milwaukee County Zoo. That holds a special piece of my heart. But I could probably go down to like another 30 animals before I got to what was really my favorite. So, and then your other question was on what's next, basically. So right now, we are building the veterinary center, which is the first of the bond projects to go off. And we are doing a master plan at the same time to time out the rest of our bond projects. We are on a very small site, 64 acres, and it's pretty compact. And so when you get ready to put in something like 6 acres for elephants, you have to make sure you're planning properly and that you're not putting out dominoes that you maybe didn't intend. And so we're doing master planning right now to plan out not just where all the bond projects are, but where does the future go for the zoo? And that helps us really direct where does it all go. We don't know the timing of all the bond projects yet. We're about halfway through that process right now. It'll be done in September. But right now, elephants will probably be first because it's the biggest one, and it looks that way very much right now. And then after that, part of the bond commitment that the voters made was to build a new polar bear exhibit, a new primate exhibit, a condor area, to do some water filtration with our hippos. We are currently doing water filtration with the penguins, improving that filtration to save about 7 million gallons of water. There's a huge focus in the bond measure as well to do sustainable building and infrastructure and really conserve our resources, especially water, so we've got some money to do that. We've got some really exciting plans that will really bring a lot of great educational messages forward for the public and also have us really be good stewards of our resources environmentally. So it's pretty exciting.
Debbie Lynn Molyneux, City Club member. I am new to the Portland area, and one of the things that just came up for me while I was listening was wondering if you had any special exhibits at the zoo, any upcoming special exhibits, and then how do you outreach to members of the community that might not be able to afford the entry fees for the zoo, and how does that outreach work?
That's a good question. So we do have coming up this summer a dinosaur exhibit. We're going to be doing dinosaurs again. And, you know, the younger crowd, I don't think dinosaurs ever get old, do they? So I know they don't with my kids. So we do have dinosaurs coming up. Next year we're looking at a new butterfly temporary exhibit. You can come in and see butterflies. So we're always looking for something like that for the summer months. As far as your other question, I'm sorry, your other question was? Outreach. Oh, outreach, right, accessibility. The Oregon Zoo does give away a tremendous amount of tickets every year. We actually have guidelines, and our basic rule is that if it's a kid in need or an organization that benefits kids in need, we really, really focus our efforts on giving those free tickets to them, foster kids, you know, anything like that, any kid that really is in need. And we give out over 100,000 tickets each year to do that. It's a big commitment by us. We also have the $4 Tuesdays to help with outreach and making sure that our communities can get to us. We advertise a lot of this on our website, so you'll see things on our website. We've also really started using Facebook to push a lot of that as well.
We've run out of time today for more questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. Join us next week when we will hear the State of the City from Portland Mayor Sam Adams. And as we close, please join me in expressing our appreciation to today's guest, Kim Smith. Thank you. We're adjourned.